All right, now that brings us to something called the oral parity laws, right? I have a pretty good idea based on the name of this. And after our discussion as to how these differ in terms of silos, I'm pretty sure I know where this is going. Tell me about the oral parity laws. Who wants to start us off?
Yeah, so the story of the oral parity drugs, in the Society of Hematology and Oncology here in Pennsylvania, so we're actually involved in the oral parity discussions at the state level. But this is not a new concept. It's been happening all along. Each state has been taking it. So right now there's over 40 states doing it. But there's no federal law covering oral parity. So
define oral parity. Let's get this on the table.
Oral parity means that the cost of an oral drug intended to be like against a certain cancer, this oncolytic, if we have an equivalent drug that is IV, the cost should be the same. So when we're putting that in that perspective, supposedly we're going to decrease cost because the issues with decreasing the donut hole and decreasing access will be overcome. However, the state laws are limited. So what we have seen overall is that the cost of care, which is what we're looking for in big picture, has not decreased. So it's actually going higher. So the laws themselves have a nice principle. However, we haven't been able to lower the cost the way we intended. And we need to just basically reframe the whole system. We want to do that. But I think there's a challenge ahead.
It seems to me that at least the intent of the oral parity laws was to lift these oral drugs out of this oral drug silo and dump it into the other one so that they're equivalent. But knowing politicians, I'll bet somebody's thinking of taking the IV drugs and lifting them up and making them more expensive the other way.
Right.
Am I right?
I would say so.
Well, you open up another can of worms, and that sometimes the payers will try to drive some of the injectable drugs into the pharmacy benefit.
I knew it. I knew it.
You know, so that does happen. We refuse that. We refuse that all the time. And so we want to keep that under the medical benefit. Certainly for any infused agent, we don't want to see that go to the pharmacy benefit side. A federal oral parity, what we want is patients to pay the same out-of-pocket amount, the same copay, whether they come into the office for an intravenous treatment or they receive an oral treatment.
Correct.
That's the bottom line, is that the out-of-pocket expense should be the same. You know, to your point, the state laws haven't addressed it because the state laws only may address one plan or a fraction of the plans, and there really is no parity. So the only way to really fix that is with a federal oral parity bill that's nationwide that would reel that all in.
But I'm a pharmaceutical company, all right? And I'm going to say these new drugs, I can hear the argument, and there's some basis for it. These are brand new drugs. I just put $1 billion of R&D into these drugs, and you're not going to allow me to get compensated into.
Oh, they get paid. So the patient isn't going to. The payers are going to pay more. That's why you have the payers lobbying against oral parity, because they're going to pay more money.
So in other words, whether the payers pay or the patients pay, the drug company
they're going to get their money. They're going to get their money.
And
It's just the out-of-pocket expense.
That's right.
Not only that, but the cost of doing clinical trials is less now than it used to be. I mean, we used to have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials to get drugs approved, large phase 3 trials. Now we're having, small, phase 2 trials, even phase 1B trials that in some cases get drugs approved.
Like pembrolizumab and for MSI high, there's only 5 different clinical trials and they had the responses, and the FDA, well, that's, I guess, a positive on their end for the patients, that now that we're getting an FDA more open-minded to take on earlier for cancer care. But then again,
I think it depends on the disease. I mean, in some diseases where the market is saturated, you still are required to do all of the trials. And the reason the pharmaceutical companies charge so much is not because of the cost of clinical trials, it's because of all the failed drugs that don't make it to the market, because they invest billions of dollars in these drugs that eventually don't even get FDA approved. And that's their explanation.
But on the other hand, you have, like the, pembrolizumab and nivolumab, these are drugs that, now are being used in every disease, almost every disease state. And the cost didn't go down as their market share is increasing.
Yeah.
But if you're telling me that the drug company is going to get their money anyway, so that what this is a fight over reimbursement, right, for the same nut, whether it's going to come from the patient's pocket or it's going to come from the plan's pocket. Is that what this is all about?
Okay.
So do the drug companies have a stake in this at all, or is this all the plans?
Oh, the drug companies have a huge stake. I mean, they're making a lot of money on
But they're going to make
on
the same money you said either way, whether it's out of the out-of-pocket expense
Right.
or it's going to be out of the plan.
Oh, I don't think they care who pays.
That's my
as long
point.
as they get paid.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that eventually the money is going to run out.
That's right.
And this is not a sustainable model.
Yeah.
So so the oral parity laws, do they make it sustainable?
No,
No.
they don't solve the issue.
It doesn't solve the cost.
Doesn't solve the issue.
And they only, because this is a state level, they're not mandating Medicare to do any of this. So the reimbursement for Medicare actually is completely unscathed. You don't do anything with that. There's no oral parity for Medicare itself.
All right, I'll be Dumbledore. I wave my magic wand, it's Medicare. We have oral parity, it's not at the state level, at the federal level. That fix the problem?
Maybe for the patients,
For Medicare
for a short
patients.
term, right. For short
Okay.
term, you help the patients out,
But not society.
not society.
Because the costs are, there's no control on the cost of these drugs. The numbers are just being made up, how much they
Yeah,
charge.
they're
for
being
these
made up.
drugs.
I think what we should do, I mean, as a society and as a specialist in cancer care, is that we should look into the efforts that ASCO is doing, like the value-based models, et cetera, looking what are the real benefits of certain drugs, not just 1 month of PFS improvement,
Right.
and see what drugs are actually worth giving our patients, not just because they're promoted or not, and putting a cost to certain things. So if something increases survival by, I don't know, like 10 years, I mean, $1 million is worth the shot. Right. But if it's something is going to just increase me 1 month with toxicities, then we shouldn't be paying that at all. Absolutely. So they just FDA approval doesn't mean that it's the best drug for my patient.
But then again, what you're telling me, what I'm hearing you say, is that there are two issues here. One is this parity, which is what pocket is the money going to come from? But the bigger issue is, should there be money coming for all of these drugs in the first place? And should there be somebody stratifying which drugs are worth paying for? And if the other drugs are not, then we can shave those down and save money. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Who's
I
going to
mean,
do
Yeah,
that?
those talks are ongoing. I mean,
Yeah.
so people are starting to talk about that. Reimbursement based on efficacy. So you may have one drug that's in multiple spaces. Why should you pay the same price when the outcomes are markedly different in two different disease states with the same drug? That gets into tiering reimbursement based on efficacy. Complex to do, but that's how it should go moving forward. Same thing with the PD-1s and PD-L1s. We don't know how long those patients should be on those agents. Maybe it should only be for 2 years and they should stop. Maybe there should be a cap on the price of those agents in certain disease states. Those are the things we need to wrestle with. There are no cost controls. What allows a company to raise two of their most profitable drugs by 19% in 1 quarter? That's unregulated. I mean, geez,
Yeah,
I wish
this
I
is
could raise
not
my prices
appropriate.
19% every time I want, then geez, I'd be fat city. But that doesn't happen in the
No, it's a
pharmaceutical world.
problem.